Welcome. Tonight, we begin a gentle journey far back in time into the quiet sands and starlit skies of ancient Arabia. In this episode, we explore the origins of Islam long before the first revelation, before the rise of a new faith, back when the desert itself held its breath, waiting for history to awaken. This story is told slowly and softly, designed to help you relax, unwind, and drift into a peaceful sleep. So find a comfortable place, let your eyes grow heavy, and allow your mind to wander through the warm dunes, the simple villages, and the early years of a child who would one day change the world, Muhammad. Take a deep breath. Let the calm settle in. And now, let us begin our story. Before the revelation, the forgotten peninsula, and the birth of a child named Muhammad. Introduction: Arabia before the light. A very, very long time ago, long before modern cities illuminated the night, the Arabian Peninsula was nothing but an immense desert. An ancient, silent, almost motionless desert, where the dunes seemed to breathe slowly in rhythm with the wind. During the day, the heat weighed down the air, making the world ripple like a mirage. At night, the sky, pure like nowhere else, filled with millions of shimmering stars, drawing a celestial map known by the travelers of the desert. Those who could read it were able to cross hundreds of kilometers without ever losing their way. Across these endless stretches, nomadic tribes traveled with their caravans. The camels walked at a steady pace, as if they already knew where they were going. The men sang sometimes to keep the rhythm, and their melodies vanished into the night, becoming almost like prayers. At that time, Arabia was a land divided. There was no single kingdom, no ruler over all, only tribes, each with their own traditions, rivalries, and alliances. And at the heart of it all, there was a city. A small city, yet already respected, Mecca. Mecca, a valley surrounded by mountains. Mecca was not yet the enormous city it would later become. It was an oasis in a dry valley, surrounded by dark, silent mountains. The wind slid gently through the streets, like an ancient breath carrying forgotten stories. Travelers came to Mecca to trade, to find water, to rest, and above all, to see a mysterious and sacred structure, the Kaaba. At that time, the Kaaba was already a respected place, a cube of dark stone, solid and enigmatic, whose origins were lost in time. Arab tribes came to deposit their idols, their offerings, their vows. The city lived to the rhythm of caravans and pilgrimages. The markets were lively, the narrow streets busy, the houses simple but warm. Among the tribes of Mecca, one had a special position. The Quraysh. They managed the Kaaba, protected the pilgrims, and ensured the prosperity of the city. It was an honorable role, respected, but also a heavy responsibility. Abdallah and Amina, a humble, precious couple. Among the Quraysh lived a young man loved by all, Abdallah ibn Abd al-Muttalib. He was described as gentle, honest, with a sincere gaze and a warm smile. People admired him for his noble character, though he was not wealthy. Abdallah married a woman known for her kindness and purity, Amina bint Wahb. Amina had a soft voice and a calm look. She came from an honorable family, and her wisdom was recognized even by the elders. Their union was peaceful, beautiful, and simple. And one day, Amina learned she was pregnant. She felt something unusual, an inner peace, as if this pregnancy carried a unique destiny. A birth wrapped in the calm of the night. But fate was harsh. Abdallah fell ill on a journey and died far from home, leaving Amina alone and expecting their child. Sadness settled in her life, gentle yet heavy. But she held on. She felt that the baby she carried had great significance. The night of the birth was calm. The sky looked clearer than usual, as if the stars had drawn closer to listen to the desert breathe. The child was born in a small house in Mecca, surrounded by caring women. Amina held him in her arms and said, "I will name him Muhammad." A rare name, a name meaning the praised one. No one knew yet that this child would one day change the world. A childhood in the desert. At that time, children in Mecca were often entrusted to Bedouin families living in the desert. People believed that the desert strengthened the body and the soul. The air was purer, the Arabic language more beautiful, and life more authentic. Muhammad was entrusted to a woman named Halima Sa'diya, a gentle, patient woman who deeply loved children. When Halima took baby Muhammad for the first time, she noticed that something changed around her. Her old camel became faster, her milk returned, her herd flourished. People whispered about a quiet blessing. In the desert, Muhammad grew up, calm, observant, rarely noisy. He loved to watch the night sky. He asked small questions, sometimes childlike, sometimes surprisingly deep, as if the world already intrigued him. Halima loved him as her own child. She kept him for several years until the time came to return him to his mother, Amina. Losses and gentle strength. Amina welcomed her son with immense joy. She took him with her on a journey to visit relatives, but once again, illness struck. Amina died, leaving Muhammad an orphan at only 6 years old. The child's heart was marked by this loss, yet he remained remarkably calm. His grandfather, Abd al-Muttalib, took him under his care. He loved the boy deeply, keeping him close even during important meetings. But 2 years later, the grandfather died as well, and Muhammad was entrusted to his uncle, Abu Talib, a generous and respected man, though not wealthy. Despite the lack of riches, Abu Talib offered Muhammad a warm home full of love and protection. The honest adolescent. As he grew older, Muhammad became a young man admired by all. People knew him for his sincerity, patience, and gentleness. Whenever someone needed a trustworthy person, they sent for him. They already called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He never lied. He never took part in injustice. He never mocked the weak or took advantage of the naive. When he began working with commercial caravans, many noticed his intelligence, his ability to observe, and his calmness in difficult situations. A decisive encounter, Khadija. In Mecca lived a brilliant businesswoman, Khadija bint Khuwailid. She managed her caravans with remarkable precision and always sought honest men to oversee them. People told her about Muhammad. She hired him. But soon, she saw in him more than an employee, a man of integrity, depth, and kindness. After a time, she proposed marriage. She was 40, he was 25. But their relationship became one of the most beautiful and peaceful in all Arabian history. Their home was a place of calm. They had children, a gentle routine, a serene life. And yet, deep inside Muhammad, something was growing, a need for solitude, a need for meditation, a need to understand the world and the meaning of things. So he began to visit a small cave on a mountain near Mecca. Part 2, the Cave of Hira, the first revelation. A changing heart in a restless world. As the years passed, Mecca continued to grow. Its markets filled with merchants from distant lands, its streets echoing with conversations and accents from across Arabia. Yet, beneath this lively surface, there was something unsettled in the hearts of many. People worshipped dozens of idols. Some believed in spirits hidden in stones and trees. Others thought fate was a blind force that played with human lives. There were stories, songs, rituals, but there was also confusion. And Muhammad, now a mature man, watched all of this with a quiet, reflective gaze. He was gentle with everyone, family, neighbors, travelers, even strangers passing through the city. But inside him, a deep sense of yearning began to grow. A need to understand, a need to step away from the noise, a need to listen, not to the world outside, but to something deeper. He found himself drawn more and more toward solitude, towards silence, toward the mountains that watched over Mecca like ancient guardians. And among all those mountains, one place called to him more than any other. The Cave of Hira, Mount Hira, a sanctuary above the desert. Mount Hira was not the tallest mountain around Mecca, but it had a presence, as if it were quietly waiting. Its slopes were rough, made of dark rock shaped by centuries of fierce winds and scorching sun. Climbing it required patience and calm, and Muhammad often made the journey step by step, alone, accompanied only by his thoughts. The path twisted through silent stone corridors where the wind hummed in narrow cracks. Sometimes he paused to watch the valley below, to see the sun rising over Mecca or the evening shadows stretching like gentle fingers across the sand. Near the top, hidden like a secret, was a small opening in the rock, a cave no bigger than a simple room, a space so still that even a whisper seemed too loud. This was where Muhammad liked to retreat. He brought food and water, enough for several days. Khadija, his beloved wife, understood his need for peace and solitude. She supported him, encouraged him, reassured him. Her calm presence was the steady foundation on which his inner world rested. In the cave, Muhammad prayed, not through rituals or words taught by others, but through deep reflection. He thought about life, kindness, justice, the suffering of the poor, the arrogance of the rich. He wondered about the stars scattered across the night sky, each one shining like a silent witness. And though he did not yet know it, something was drawing near. The night everything changed. It was during one of these retreats, when Muhammad was around 40 years old, that the world shifted. The night was quiet. Outside the cave, the desert lay still under a sky full of stars. A cool breeze moved gently across the mountain, carrying the faint aroma of distant sand and the deep silence of the valley. Inside the cave, Muhammad sat in contemplation. His heart was calm, his mind focused. Then, suddenly, something changed. The air around him seemed to thicken, as if the very atmosphere were holding its breath. A strange stillness filled the cave, an intense, powerful presence that was neither frightening nor familiar, but overwhelming in a way that words cannot describe. And then, a voice not like any voice of this world, neither loud nor gentle, but pure, undeniable, and majestic. It said, "Read." Muhammad startled. He looked around but saw no one. He replied softly, from the depths of confusion, "I do not know how to read." The presence grew closer, more encompassing, as if the cave itself was filled with light, though no light could be seen. Again, the voice commanded, "Read." Muhammad trembled. His heart pounded. He felt a pressure, a closeness, so powerful, so absolute, that he could barely breathe. And again he responded, his voice trembling, I do not know how to read." Then the presence embraced him, firmly, intensely, like a force pressing against his very soul. And when it released him, the voice spoke once more. "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot. Read, for your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know." And just as suddenly as it began, the presence vanished. The cave fell silent again. But nothing was the same. A heart overwhelmed. Muhammad was left trembling. The words echoed inside him like thunder wrapped in softness. He felt shaken to his core, terrified yet illuminated, confused yet certain that something extraordinary had just taken place. He left the cave, quickly, descending the mountain in the dark. His steps were shaky, almost stumbling, as if the world around him had become unfamiliar. Every rock, every shadow, every gust of wind felt different. The stars seemed brighter. The desert seemed deeper. He felt as though he had stepped out of one world and into another. As he walked, he heard a voice once again, this time in the air above him, filling the horizon. "O Muhammad, you are the messenger of God." He turned instinctively, but he saw only the night sky stretching in all directions. Terrified, overwhelmed, breathless, he hurried home. Khadija, the first comfort in a new world. When Muhammad entered his home, he said to Khadija, his voice trembling, "Cover me, cover me." She wrapped him in a cloth, her hands gentle, her presence steady. She did not question him immediately. She simply comforted him, letting the tremors in his body settle, letting him breathe. Only when he calmed did he tell her what had happened. Every detail, every feeling, every word spoken in the cave. And Khadija listened, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with calm certainty. When he finished, she placed her hand on his shoulder and said with absolute confidence, "By God, he will never disgrace you. You are good to your family, kind to the poor, you help those in need, you honor your guests, and you support the truth. What happened to you cannot be something bad." Her words were like a balm, steady, warm, grounding. Khadija became the first believer, the first heart to open fully to what was coming. But she wanted to seek further reassurance, not for lack of faith, but to help Muhammad find clarity. So she took him to her cousin, a wise elderly man named Waraka ibn Nawfal, who had studied ancient scriptures and knew the stories of prophets. The wisdom of Waraka. Waraka listened carefully as Muhammad described the experience in the cave. His eyes widened with recognition, and he said, "This is the same messenger, the angel Gabriel, who came to Moses and you have been chosen." He paused, then added with sadness, "Your people will oppose you. They will turn against you. But if I am alive when that day comes, I will stand by your side." These words echoed deeply in Muhammad's heart, not out of fear, but because they revealed the weight of the path ahead. The revelation had come. A message had arrived. But its meaning, its mission, its consequences had only just begun. The quiet after the storm. After that night, the revelations did not come every day. There was a pause, days, weeks, during which Muhammad felt uncertainty, longing, and sometimes fear that the presence would not return. He went about his life, quietly, humbly, carrying the memory of that night like a hidden flame. At times, he returned to Mount Hira, searching for the voice, for the light, for the overwhelming presence. He did not know when or how the message would continue. But he knew one thing. The world had changed. His life had changed. A new chapter of history had opened, and the silence between revelations was simply the calm before a rising tide, a tide that would soon reshape an entire civilization, and eventually the world. Part 3. The early years of the message. A new dawn in a familiar city. When the revelations resumed after a period of silence, Muhammad felt something settle inside him. A sense of purpose that was gentle yet firm, like dawn light slowly filling a dark room. The words came to him in moments of deep reflection. Messages about kindness, charity, humility, and the oneness of God. They arrived with clarity, like water flowing from a hidden spring. But these revelations were still private. Only a few hearts knew of them. The rest of Mecca continued its daily rhythm: trade, rituals, celebration, and the worship of countless idols. For now, the message was small, quiet, a seed planted in the vast field of a city that had no idea what was coming. The first believers, gentle hearts awaken. The first person to accept the message fully and completely was already beside him. Khadijah, his wife. Her faith was unwavering, steady like the mountains that surrounded Mecca. She saw truth in his eyes before anyone else, and her support became the foundation of the early mission. But soon others joined: Ali ibn Abi Talib, a young boy living in Muhammad's household. Curious, intelligent, and sincere, he embraced the message with childlike clarity and became one of the very first to pray beside Muhammad. Zayd ibn Haritha, a freedman treated as a member of the family. His loyalty was deep, and when he heard the message, he accepted it with a heart full of trust. Abu Bakr, a gentle, wise, and respected merchant, known for his honesty and calm nature. When he heard the revelations, he believed without hesitation, his heart recognizing truth instantly. Through Abu Bakr, several others joined the early circle. One by one, quietly, discreetly. There were no gatherings in public squares, no speeches shouted through the markets, only whispers of faith, exchanged in the safety of trusted homes, soft prayers in quiet corners, small. Circles of believers sitting together under the warm glow of oil lamps, listening to verses that touched them like cool rain on hot sand. It was a peaceful beginning, but soon everything would change. A message that challenged a city. Mecca was a city built on tradition, trade, and the worship of many idols. Each tribe had its own beliefs, its own symbols, its own rituals. The Kaaba was filled with statues, some made of stone, some of wood, some of precious materials. Pilgrims came from far away to honor their idols. Trade flourished because of this. The Quraysh were proud protectors of the sanctuary and its economic and religious importance. So when Muhammad began to speak about one God, about justice, compassion, humility, and especially about the emptiness of the idols, his message was not just spiritual, it challenged the entire structure of Meccan society. Still, he did not begin with public proclamations. At first, the call remained gentle and private. For almost 3 years, Muhammad invited only those he trusted deeply. He met believers in hidden places, sometimes in the safety of a home, sometimes at night near the hills outside the city. He taught them how to pray, not with loud chants or complex rituals, but with simple movements and sincere words. Quiet moments of connection with the divine. The early Muslims were few, but their hearts were strong. The Valley of Al-Arqam, a secret gathering place. As the number of believers slowly grew, a need arose for a place where they could meet safely. One of the early converts, a young man named Al-Arqam, offered his home. It was a modest house in a quiet corner of Mecca, hidden from the busy streets. There, behind closed doors, the community gathered. They listened to the new revelations. They learned. They prayed. They grew closer, like a small flame gaining strength in the protection of a windless room. The house of Al-Arqam became a sanctuary, a place where fear melted into hope and confusion turned into clarity. It was here that Islam took its earliest breaths as a community, here that friendships formed, here that hearts began to change. But the secrecy could not last forever. A public call, a mountain, a message. One day, Muhammad received a revelation instructing him to warn his people openly. His heart understood that a new phase had begun. The quiet, private days were ending. Ahead lay confrontation, struggle, and resistance. He climbed the hill of Safa, a familiar rise near the Kaaba used by the people of Mecca to make important announcements. He stood where all could see him. He called out to the tribes by name. Voices echoed through the valley as people gathered in curiosity. When everyone was present, he spoke clearly. "If I told you that an army was approaching from behind this hill, would you believe me?" The people replied, "Yes, we have never known you to lie." Then he said, "Then know that I warn you of a punishment to come. There is no God but God. Turn away from the idols you worship." A brief silence fell on the crowd. Some were shocked, some confused, some laughed, thinking it strange. But one man, loud and harsh, responded with ridicule. "May you be ruined for this. Was this why you called us?" This man was Muhammad's own uncle, Abu Lahab, whose opposition would become fierce in the years to come. The moment was a turning point. The gentle era of secrecy had officially ended. A storm was beginning to form. Rising tension, a city divided. After the public announcement, the Quraysh began to worry. Muhammad's message threatened their traditions, their authority, and their economy. If people abandoned the idols, what would happen to the pilgrimages, the markets, the tribal balance? At first, they tried gentle persuasion. They approached Abu Talib, Muhammad's uncle and protector. They offered him wealth, status, influence, but only if he convinced Muhammad to stop preaching. Abu Talib went to his nephew, troubled but honest. He told Muhammad of the pressure he was facing. Muhammad listened quietly. Then he said, his voice steady, "Even if they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I would not abandon this mission." Abu Talib felt a deep warmth in his heart. He replied, "Go, my nephew. Do what you must. I will never abandon you." His support would protect Muhammad for years, but it would also deepen the Quraysh's frustration. Slowly, rumors began to spread. Whispers turned into arguments. Arguments grew into insults. Insults into threats. The early Muslims, once just ordinary citizens of Mecca, found themselves watched, mocked, and pressured. The storm was gathering, the strength of a small community. Despite the rising hostility, the small Muslim community continued to grow. They met quietly in the house of Al-Arqam. They learned new verses that spoke of mercy, patience, resilience, and the beauty of creation. Revelations encouraged them to care for the poor, to treat the weak with dignity, to live with truth and humility. At night, they prayed together under the stars. Their voices were soft, barely louder than the desert wind, but their faith grew stronger with each passing day. Among the converts were people from all walks of life, young and old, rich and poor, free and enslaved, men and women. Islam began to transcend the barriers of tribe and social status, something unheard of in Meccan society. The Quraysh noticed, and their worry turned into anger. Soon, the peaceful beginning would give way to hardship. A test of strength, patience, and faith awaited the early believers. But for now, in these first years, there was unity, there was quiet determination, there was the gentle warmth of a new faith taking shape. The seed planted in the heart of the desert was beginning to grow. PART 4. The early whisper of faith, the first believers. The mountain had grown quiet. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Muhammad lived his life gently and carefully, carrying the weight of the first revelation like a flame cupped between his hands, fragile, powerful, and deeply mysterious. Then, one calm evening, as the sky faded into soft shades of rose and gold, the silence finally broke. A return to revelation. Muhammad was walking alone between the rugged stones near Mecca when the familiar presence washed over him. A feeling like being surrounded by warm light. And then, the voice. Not rushed, not overwhelming, simply present. Gabriel returned with words that flowed like water, reminding Muhammad that he had been chosen, that he was not abandoned, that his mission had only just begun. These new verses brought reassurance, steadiness, and direction. Muhammad listened with a quiet heart, breathing slowly as each word settled into him like sand returning to stillness after a breeze. When the revelation faded, he stood for a long moment, letting the silence fold back around him. This time, he did not feel fear, only purpose. Something had begun, and it could no longer stay hidden forever. The secret circle begins. Muhammad shared the next verses with Khadija, who once again wrapped him in her calm, steady certainty. Her faith had not wavered, not even for a heartbeat, and her support became a foundation. Soon after, the message reached someone very dear to Muhammad. A quiet, thoughtful young cousin who had grown up under his care, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali was still a boy, on the edge between childhood and maturity. He watched Muhammad with wide eyes, sensing his seriousness, sensing the truth in his voice. When Muhammad explained the message and what it meant, Ali did not respond immediately. He wanted to think, to understand. He asked for one night. That night, the stars sparkled coldly above the valley, and Ali lay awake, turning Muhammad's words over in his mind. At dawn, with the sky pale and soft, he returned. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. He accepted the message. He became the first young man to believe, stepping into history with the quiet confidence of someone who knew he was choosing honesty over fear. The faith of a friend. Not long after, another figure stepped forward. A man whose loyalty to Muhammad was deeper than the desert's own roots. Abu Bakr. Gentle, wise, trustworthy, respected in all of Mecca. When Muhammad shared the revelation with him, Abu Bakr did not hesitate. He did not ask for a sign or a miracle or proof. His reply was simple. If you say it is true, then it is true. His immediate belief became a symbol through the ages, an example of a pure, unshaken trust that strengthened Muhammad's spirit in those early, fragile days. Through Abu Bakr, others quietly entered the circle. Merchants, freed slaves, travelers, humble laborers, people of many backgrounds, drawn by the calm truthfulness of the message. This was not yet a movement, not yet a challenge to Mecca. It was a whisper, soft, steady, carried from one heart to another. Gatherings in the quiet. In the earliest days, the small group met in secret, often in the home of a man named Al-Arqam, whose house sat quietly along the slopes of Safa. Behind closed doors and drawn curtains, the believers would sit on woven mats while Muhammad recited slowly, letting each verse settle into the air like drifting incense. There was no ceremony, no banners, no grand announcements, just soft voices, deep breaths, and a growing sense that something ancient and powerful was unfolding in front of them. Some nights, they would speak of mercy, other nights about patience, and other nights about the oneness of God, a concept that felt both revolutionary and deeply familiar, as if it had been waiting beneath the surface of their lives. And day by day, the small circle grew. A gentle beginning before the storm. Outside, Mecca continued its busy life, traders shouting, caravans rising in dust, storytellers filling the markets with tales. No one knew that history was being shaped quietly in a small house above the city. No one suspected that a new chapter of faith had already begun. For now, the message moved like a soft ripple across still water. Subtle, peaceful, barely visible. But soon, those ripples would expand, and the world around Muhammad would begin to shift. Slowly at first, then suddenly. And nothing ever again would be the same. Part 5, the first public call and the stirring of Mecca. For 3 quiet years, the message moved like a soft breeze through the narrow alleys of Mecca. Gentle, subtle, touching only those who were ready to listen. The early believers grew slowly in number, gathering in whispers, learning in peace, holding to their new faith with warmth and humility. But every beginning has a moment when silence must give way to voice. And for Muhammad, that moment came with a revelation that changed everything. The call from the mountain. One still morning, as sunlight softened the rocky hills surrounding Mecca, a verse descended that carried a new instruction. Clear, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. Proclaim openly what you have been commanded. It was no longer a whisper, no longer a message meant for a few. It was time for the truth to step into the open air. Muhammad understood what this meant. The city loved its traditions. It protected its idols fiercely, announcing a message of pure monotheism. A message of equality, humility, and accountability would shake Mecca like a sudden wind against fragile tents. But he did not hesitate. He had carried the message quietly long enough. He climbed the small rise of Mount Safa, a place where announcements were made, where voices could reach the scattered homes below. And then, in a calm and steady tone, Muhammad called out to the people of Quraysh. Men paused. In the streets, women turned from their doorways. Traders, shepherds, and travelers gathered beneath the hill, curious and slightly puzzled. Muhammad spoke to them as a trusted member of their own community. A man they had always called Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He asked them a simple question. If he warned them of danger behind the mountain, would they believe him? They answered without doubt. Yes, we have never known you to lie. And with that, he announced his mission. He told them of the oneness of God, of the coming accountability, of the message he had received, of the path he was commanded to open. The words were gentle, but they fell like stones into still water. The silence afterward was deep and sharp, the kind of silence that appears before a storm. The first waves of resistance. Not everyone responded calmly. The first to speak was Abu Lahab, an uncle by blood but not by heart. His voice rose harshly, trembling with anger and fear. He rejected the message immediately and loudly. Others followed his lead, muttering, frowning, backing away with suspicion written on their faces. For Mecca, the idea of one God was not just unusual. It threatened the very structure of their society, their trade, their influence, their customs. All were tied tightly to the presence of many idols at the Kaaba. If those idols were questioned, if the old ways were challenged, Mecca's leaders feared they would lose power, wealth, and status. And so, resistance began, slowly at first, like a tightening rope, then more openly, more sharply, more painfully. The quiet strength of the believers. While the leaders of Quraysh whispered and plotted, the small circle of believers continued to gather. Softly, peacefully, often in the house of Al-Arqam, where comfort and calm still guarded them. Some were wealthy, some were poor, some were young and full of hope. Others were older, carrying lifetimes of hardship behind them. But each one shared something now. A purpose that made their hearts steadier, a light that gently guided them through the growing conflict. When the people of Mecca scoffed or rolled their eyes, the believers simply breathed deeply and remained patient. When someone muttered an insult in the market, they lowered their gaze and kept walking. When a family member argued with them at home, they answered softly instead of raising their voice. It was not weakness, it was resilience. Quiet, steady, unshakable, they had chosen a path that brought them peace, even in the middle of tension. A message too strong to contain. But Mecca is a place of echoes. Stories do not stay hidden. Ideas do not stay small. A whisper spoken on a mountaintop becomes a rumor in a marketplace. And a rumor becomes a conversation. And a conversation becomes a threat in the minds of those who fear change. Soon, the news reached every corner of the city. Muhammad was calling to one God. The idols were meaningless. The old ways were fading. A new teaching had begun. And this time, Quraysh did not stay silent. They met in the council halls. They muttered beneath the shadow of the Kaaba. They shared worried glances over cups of bitter coffee. They spoke of danger, disruption, and dishonor. The soft beginnings of Islam had now touched the heart of Mecca's power. And the response would no longer be gentle. Before the hardship begins. For now, tension hovered in the air like dust after a caravan, not yet violent, not yet unbearable. Just, tightening, slowly, carefully, inevitably, the believers could feel it. They sensed the coming challenges. But their hearts remained steady, anchored by faith, strengthened by each new verse, comforted by Muhammad's presence. They did not know what storms lay ahead. They did not know how far their journey would take them. But step by step, revelation by revelation, they were ready to face whatever came next. The message had been carried into the open, and Mecca had begun to shift. The quiet days were ending. Soon, the trials would begin. Part 6, the first hardships, patience in the heat of Mecca. The days after the first public call settled over Mecca like a veil of tension. The air felt different now, heavier, expectant, unsure. The city still bustled with busy markets, clinking tools, and caravan bells echoing in the distance. But beneath the familiar rhythm, something had changed. People whispered more than they spoke. They watched Muhammad and his companions with cautious, calculating eyes. Old friends hesitated, families murmured behind closed doors, and the leaders of Quraysh began to move with a quiet, uneasy purpose. Change had arrived in Mecca, and with change came fear. And with fear came hostility. The gentle hearts who stood firm. At this early stage, the Muslims were a small group, a blend of the respected, the humble, the wealthy, the enslaved, the young, and the old. Many had little protection. Their faith was new, tender, like a fragile flower pushing through the cracks of stone. But their hearts were steady, strengthened by the calm guidance of Muhammad and the peace they felt in the words of Revelation. Still, Mecca would not let them stand in peace. The whisper that turned to pressure. The leaders of Quraysh stared at the Kaaba's towering walls and the idols surrounding it. These idols were their pride, their business, their identity. If those idols fell, the leaders feared everything else would fall with them. Their trade with distant tribes, their influence over travelers, their long-held authority. So they met in shaded courtyards and stone houses, voices low but determined. They agreed on one thing. This new message had to be stopped early, gently, if possible, harshly, if needed. The first attempt was persuasion. They approached Muhammad's relatives. They offered compromises. They suggested quiet negotiation. They tried to pull him away from his mission, step by step, word by word. But he remained calm, steady, unmoved. And when persuasion failed, Quraysh turned to pressure. The weight of the first persecution. The pressure began subtly. A few harsh words on the street, a cold stare in the marketplace, a refusal to trade or greet. But soon, it grew sharper. Those without protection felt the first sting. Among them were enslaved men and women, people who had no tribe to shield them, no wealth to bargain with, no status to soften the blow. Their faith placed them under the open sky of suffering. The sun in Mecca can be merciless. It rises with a heat that feels alive, like a force pressing against skin and stone. And it was under this burning sky that some of the earliest Muslims endured their trials. Bilal, a voice stronger than chains. Among the ones who suffered most was Bilal ibn Rabah, a man of Ethiopian origin, known for his calm nature and clear, resonant voice. His master, angered by Bilal's new faith, sought to break him. Bilal was dragged onto the scorching sand at midday. A heavy stone was placed on his chest. Voices shouted at him to renounce the message. But Bilal's reply was not a scream or a cry. It was a single steady word. Ahad. One. His voice did not tremble. It rose above the heat, above the pain, above the hostility. Again and again. Ahad, Ahad. One, one. A whisper of monotheism in the face of cruelty. Soft but unbreakable, this patience, this serenity in suffering would echo across generations. Yasser, Sumaya, and the first martyrs. Close to Bilal's suffering was the hardship of a humble family. Yasir, Sumaya, and their son, Ammar. They were simple people, without influence or protection, and because of that, they became easy targets. Their persecutors sought to silence them through fear, through pain, through relentless pressure. Ammar watched as his aging parents were pushed beyond their limits, yet their hearts stayed anchored to their faith. One hot day, Sumaya, small, elderly, but fierce in her belief, refused to bend. Her voice, though tired, held the same calm certainty she had felt in her heart from the moment she embraced the message. Her courage angered her tormentor Dot, and in a moment of cruelty Dot, she became the first martyr of Islam. Her husband Yasir soon followed the same path. Muhammad, deeply moved, whispered to Ammar with a soft sadness, "Patience, family of Yasir, your meeting place is in paradise." These words soothed the aching hearts of the small Muslim community, giving them strength to endure what they could not escape. A rising tide of hardship. As days turned to weeks, Quraysh sharpened their strategies. They mocked, they insulted, they shouted in the streets when Muhammad recited. They placed thorns in his path. They threw dust over his back while he prayed. Some wealthy Muslims were cut off from their business. Some families were torn apart, refusing to speak to relatives who had embraced the new faith. Others were imprisoned, threatened, or pushed to the edge of despair. It was not yet violence on a grand scale. It was pressure, constant and suffocating Dot like a rope slowly tightening around the early believers' lives. Yet through all this, their trust did not break, their hope did not dim, their connection to the revelation only grew stronger. The peace that carried them. What sustained them was not power, nor numbers, nor safety. It was the soft comfort of the verses Muhammad recited, the warmth of their small gatherings, the shared feeling that they were part of something pure and ancient, something that would one day ease the burdens of countless souls. Revelation continued to descend, bringing gentle reassurance. Verses about patience, verses about endurance, taught. Verses reminding them that hardship is followed by ease, always. And each night, as the city fell into silence and the stars shone against the black desert sky, the believers whispered their prayers with calm hearts. Mecca was tightening its grip, but the faith within them was growing stronger than the fear around them. The first storm had arrived, yet the believers remained standing, quiet, steady, unbroken. Part 7, The Boycott. Years in the Shadowed Valley. The early years of hardship in Mecca settled like dust over the Muslim community. Light at first, then heavier, then nearly suffocating. But still, the believers endured. Their gatherings continued, their prayers deepened, their connection to Muhammad grew stronger. And Quraysh watched all of this with increasing frustration. Every strategy they tried, mockery, pressure, threats, seemed to do the opposite of what they wanted. Instead of weakening the Muslims, it only made them more united. So the leaders of Mecca decided something drastic. A plan colder and more calculated than anything they had attempted before. A plan meant not just to pressure the Muslims, but to break them completely. A pact written in hostility. One evening, inside the shaded halls of Quraysh's meeting place, the most powerful clans gathered. Voices murmured in anger, frustration, and fear. They wrote a pact. A formal agreement sealed inside the Kaaba itself that meant to cut off Muhammad, his followers, and even his protective clan, the Banu Hashim. The pact declared, no trade, no marriage, no buying from them, no selling to them, no contact of any kind, complete social and economic isolation. It was not only against the Muslims, but also against those who protected Muhammad, even if they themselves had not accepted the message. Abu Talib, Muhammad's uncle, had never embraced Islam, but he loved his nephew, and love in that time was as binding as blood. so Quraysh targeted him too. The boycott was agreed upon, sealed, hung inside the Kaaba, a symbol of Mecca's determination. And with that, the Valley of Hardship began. The Valley of Abu Talib. Under the light of the moon, the clan of Banu Hashim gathered their belongings. They walked slowly out of Mecca, guided by Abu Talib, moving toward a narrow, rocky valley on the outskirts of the city. Muhammad walked with them, calm, steady, hopeful, even as the darkness closed around them. The Muslims joined as well, men, women, children. Carrying small bundles, scarce food, precious little comfort. The valley was tight and uneven, with only a few shelters made of rough cloth and stones. There was no marketplace, no flowing water, no visitors bringing goods, just silence, dust, hunger, and patience. This place became their home for months. Then for years, 3 long, difficult years. Life in the shadows of isolation. Days blended into one another with quiet endurance. Food grew scarce quickly. Sometimes they survived on leaves, sometimes on scraps secretly sent by distant relatives or compassionate strangers. At night, the cries of hungry children echoed softly against the hills. Mothers held them close, whispering stories or verses to soothe them. Fathers paced gently, trying to calm their own hearts. Muhammad moved among the people with kindness, offering comfort, prayer, reassurance. He reminded them that hardship was part of every great journey, and that no struggle was ever without meaning. In the stillness of the valley, revelation continued to descend. Beautiful verses that brought calm to tired souls, like cool shade drifting over scorching sand. Despite the pain, despite the hunger, the faith of the believers did not weaken. It grew deeper, more rooted, more certain. Sometimes, late at night when the valley was quiet, the Muslims would gather around Muhammad, listening to his gentle recitation. The desert wind carried the sound like a soft lullaby across the barren hills. In the heart of hardship, a quiet peace remained. The hidden kindness within Mecca. Even during those dark years, kindness still flickered inside Mecca. There were men among the Quraysh who disagreed with the boycott. Not because they believed in the message, but because they could not stand to see innocent families suffer. Some sneaked food at night, slipping small bags of grain through narrow paths. Others tried to negotiate for mercy, but the leaders refused to listen. Compassion survived in secret, like a single lamp sheltered from a harsh wind. And in time, that compassion grew stronger. A pact begins to crack. After nearly 3 years, a shift began within Mecca. Some leaders started to question the boycott. Others felt guilt, discomfort, or doubt. The suffering of children and the isolation of an entire clan weighed on their conscience. One night, several men met quietly in the shadows, away from the eyes of those who enforced the pact. They agreed that the boycott had gone too far. The next morning, they walked into the assembly, their voices firm and unafraid. They challenged the pact openly, and just as they demanded its removal, a startling discovery was made. The parchment hung inside the Kaaba had been eaten by insects. Only the words invoking hostility remained, while the rest had been erased. To the Muslims, this was a sign. To others, it was a strange coincidence. But either way, the pact was broken. Word reached the valley. Relief spread through the exhausted families like cool rain across dry soil. After years of isolation, the gates of Mecca were open to them again. Slowly, step by step, the Muslims and the Banu Hashim returned to the city. They were thinner, weaker, tired, but their hearts were unshaken, and their unity stronger than ever. The calm before a greater sorrow. Their return felt peaceful at first, but this peace carried a quiet weight, a subtle heaviness in the air, because soon Mecca would face the loss of two people whose presence had protected Muhammad more than anyone realized. Two pillars, two sources of comfort, and their departure would mark one of the hardest years in Muhammad's life. A year remembered forever as the Year of Sorrow, Part8, the Year of Sorrow, loss, loneliness, and a journey into pain. The return from the valley brought a gentle sense of relief. The Muslims were thinner, quieter, marked by years of hunger. But they were home again, inside the city they knew so well. For a brief moment, it felt as though life might soften. The markets reopened to them. Family members spoke again. The believers could walk through the streets without the sting of isolation. But this fragile peace was the beginning of a much deeper hardship. A hardship not from hunger or boycott, but from loss. The illness of Abu Talib. Abu Talib, Muhammad's uncle, had stood by him through every trial. He wasn't a wealthy man, nor a powerful warrior. But his influence, his reputation, and his love formed a shield around Muhammad. For over 40 years, Abu Talib had protected him like a father.de, fending him against the hostility of Mecca. Standing firm when others tried to harm or silence him. But the years of stress, responsibility, and aging had weakened him. Not long after the boycott ended, Abu Talib fell gravely ill. Muhammad visited him often, sitting beside his bed with quiet affection. The room was dim, the air still, the sound of Abu Talib's breathing soft but heavy. Quraysh leaders visited too. Not out of compassion, but because they saw opportunity. Even as Abu Talib lay weak, they urged him to pressure Muhammad to abandon his mission. But Abu Talib, tired yet unbroken, defended his nephew one last time. And then, on a calm day, in the stillness of the afternoon, Abu Talib took his final breath. His passing felt like the world losing one of its pillars. A man who had stood between Muhammad and danger for so long. Muhammad loved him deeply. And though he remained composed, grief settled over him like a long shadow. The loss of Khadija. No sooner had one sorrow struck than another followed. Khadija, beloved wife, companion, confidant, had been the steady heart of Muhammad's life for decades. She had been the first to believe in his message, the first to comfort him, the first to encourage him when fear touched his heart in the cave of Hira. She supported him with her kindness, her wisdom, her generosity, and above all, her unwavering faith. Her home had been a sanctuary during the hardest moments, a place of warmth, a place of peace. But now, Khadija too grew ill. Her strength faded slowly, gently, like a candle burning low after a long night. Muhammad stayed by her side, holding her hand, speaking softly, remembering the lifetime of love they had shared. And when she passed away, the quiet was overwhelming. A silence deeper than any he had felt before. The city seemed emptier. The nights felt longer, and the world quieter. In the span of months, Muhammad had lost the two people who had stood closest to his heart. The Year of Sorrow. These losses were so heavy, so deeply felt, that the year came to be known as Aam al-Hazn. The Year of Sorrow. Muhammad continued his mission, but the world around him felt more fragile now. The protection of Abu Talib was gone. The comfort of Khadija was gone, and Quraysh saw this moment of vulnerability as their chance. Hostility grows sharper. Without Abu Talib's presence, the leaders of Mecca grew more aggressive. They mocked louder. They threatened more openly. They threw dirt, stones, insults. One man even placed the filthy remains of an animal on Muhammad's back while he prayed. But he did not respond with anger, not once. He simply finished his prayer, his voice calm, his heart steady. Yet the hostility worsened with each passing day. Mecca felt tighter, colder, less welcoming, and Muhammad felt compelled to seek help elsewhere. To look beyond the city for someone, somewhere, who might listen. The journey to Taif. Taif lay beyond the mountains, a city surrounded by orchards and cool breezes. People spoke of its kindness, its gentler air, its promise of refuge. So Muhammad walked there, miles and miles under the desert sun, hoping only for open hearts, or at least open ears. But when he arrived in Taif, the reception was not kindness, not gentleness, not peace. The leaders of the city mocked him. They dismissed him harshly. They refused even to listen. And then, in a moment of cruelty, they ordered their young men to drive him out. Stones flew, shouts filled the air. The road became a path of pain as he walked out on endured, bleeding heart, heavy. It was one of the most painful moments of his life. He found shelter at the edge of a small orchard, his body weakened, his sandals stained with blood. He raised a gentle prayer, not of anger, not of revenge, but of sadness, humility, and hope. Even in suffering, his heart remained peaceful. The comfort that followed. As he rested in the shade of the trees, something extraordinary happened. A servant brought grapes to him. A simple act of kindness after so much cruelty. And later, on his journey back toward Mecca, a moment of divine comfort unfolded. A sign of reassurance, a reminder that he was not alone, that his mission still lived, that compassion and protection surrounded him even when the world seemed dark. This comfort restored his strength. It steadied his heart. And though Mecca remained hostile, he returned to it with renewed purpose. The year of sorrow had shaken him deeply, but it had not broken him. In the quiet of the night, under the wide sky and its countless stars, Muhammad understood something profound. Every hardship carried meaning. Every loss carried wisdom. Every sorrow carried the seed of new hope. And soon, a new chapter, one unlike anything before, would begin to unfold. Part 9, The Night Journey, A Path Through the Stars. The nights after the year of sorrow were quiet. Quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Muhammad walked through Mecca with a calm heart, but the weight of loss remained with him. A soft echo of empty spaces, quiet rooms, and memories that lingered in the air. He continued to preach with patience. Some listened, most turned away, and a few grew increasingly hostile. But in the unseen world, something was preparing to unfold. An experience unlike anything he had ever known. An event that would lift his spirit, forward his heart, and expand the horizons of his mission far beyond the earth itself. The stillness before the journey. It was a night like any other. The city dark, the alleys silent, the stars resting quietly above Mecca. Muhammad was near the Kaaba, standing in a moment of reflection, when a presence approached. Gentle, familiar, and radiant, it was the angel Gabriel. There was no urgency, no fear, only a calm invitation. A creature unlike any he had seen before awaited him, a mount shimmering with a soft, otherworldly light. It was called Al-Burak, neither horse nor mule, but something between the earthly and the heavenly. Swift and elegant, Muhammad mounted it with Gabriel beside him, and the night journey began. The journey to Jerusalem. The world passed beneath them with silent grace. Mountains, valleys, deserts, all drifting below like a painting seen from above. The cool air of the night wrapped around them, and the stars felt closer than ever, as though watching in quiet wonder. They traveled far. Farther than any traveler could imagine in a single night, until they reached the sacred city of Jerusalem. At the site that would one day be known as Al-Aqsa Mosque, Muhammad dismounted. There, gathered in a way beyond time, were the prophets who had come before him. Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and many more. Each a bearer of divine guidance, each a voice that had called humanity to goodness. In this moment outside the boundaries of ordinary life, Muhammad led them in prayer. A symbol of continuity, a sign that his mission was part of a much greater story. It was peaceful, humbling, and filled with a sense of unity that words can scarcely describe. But this was only the beginning. Ascending through the heavens. From Jerusalem, the journey rose upward. Not like climbing a mountain, but like drifting gently into a new dimension of existence. The first heaven opened with a light that glowed softly, like the break of dawn. There stood Adam, the father of humanity, welcoming Muhammad with warmth and joy. Then came the second heaven, where he met Jesus and John, peaceful, kind, and filled with serenity. In the third, he met Joseph, whose beauty was said to be unparalleled. In the fourth, Idris. In the fifth, Aaron. In the sixth, Moses, who greeted him with deep affection and a knowing glance, as though understanding the immense task that awaited him. And in the seventh heaven stood Abraham, leaning against the lote tree of the furthest boundary, a sacred place where creation feels close to the divine. Each encounter was calm, respectful, filled with gentle conversation. Prophets meeting prophets, hearts aligned in purpose. The journey carried a deep sense of peace, as though the entire universe were welcoming him. The divine audience. Beyond the seventh heaven, Muhammad reached a boundary where even Gabriel stopped. The angel, his companion, his guide, could go no further. "This is where my path ends," Gabriel said softly, "but yours continues." Alone, yet surrounded by an indescribable serenity, Muhammad was drawn forward into a presence beyond earthly understanding. There, in a way human words cannot fully express, he received reassurance, comfort, and instruction. A deep spiritual connection that soothed the wounds of the past year and filled his heart with renewed strength. Among the guidance revealed was the command for prayer. Not as a burden, but as a gift. A moment of daily ascent, a connection between earth and heaven, a quiet refuge for every believer. When the encounter ended, Muhammad returned the way he had come. Back through the heavens, back to Jerusalem, back across the desert skies, back to Mecca before the night was over. Returning to a world unchanged, yet changed forever. As dawn approached, Mecca looked the same. Stone houses, sleeping streets, the Kaaba resting in the early silence. But inside Muhammad's heart, everything felt different. He had traveled across worlds. He had stood among prophets. He had been comforted after sorrow. He had witnessed signs that the soul can barely comprehend. The journey had been a gift, not only for him, but for everyone who would follow the message he carried. It strengthened him. It healed him. It prepared him for what was to come. Because soon, a new chapter, one that would reshape the destiny of entire nations, would begin to unfold. A chapter whispered by travelers, carried by distant tribes, and rooted in a city far to the north, where hearts were beginning to soften. The city of Yathrib, Part 10, whispered hope, the first seeds of Yathrib. In the months after the night journey, Mecca remained the same on the surface. The sand, the stone houses, the narrow alleys. But something subtle had shifted. Muhammad walked with renewed calm, as though carrying a secret light within him. A quiet reassurance that softened every hardship. The believers felt it too. A sense that the path ahead, though still difficult, was leading towards something meaningful. But the city of Mecca did not soften with them. The insults continued. The threats grew sharper. Some believers were beaten in the streets. Others were mocked in their homes. A few still faced torture from masters who refused to let them believe freely. Despite this, Islam slowly, quietly continued to spread. Like water finding its way through the smallest cracks, and in a land far to the north, beyond mountains and oases, a new chapter was beginning to take shape, a chapter born from a simple conversation. In the middle of a busy pilgrimage season, the pilgrims of Yathrib. Every year, tribes from all over Arabia visited Mecca. During the months of pilgrimage, bringing their goods, their families, their traditions, and their curiosity. Some came for trade, some for worship, some simply to see what was happening in the sacred city. Among these visitors were small groups from a distant oasis called Yathrib, a city of palm groves and fresh wells, surrounded by volcanic hills, home to two major Arab tribes, the Albas and the Khazraj, and several Jewish communities. For generations, Yathrib had been a land of tension. Old conflicts resurfaced often. Clans argued. Leaders competed. People longed for stability, for someone who could bring peace to their home. And so, when a few curious men from Yathrib heard whispers about a man in Mecca claiming revelation, they decided to listen. They met Muhammad quietly, not in the open, not among the markets, but in a calm, shaded place near Mina, away from the noise of the pilgrims. His voice was gentle, his message simple, his presence peaceful. As he spoke about the oneness of God, the importance of compassion, justice, kindness, and unity, something stirred inside them. A feeling they had been searching for without realizing. When the conversation ended, the men left with thoughtful expressions, carrying his words with them, like seeds waiting for rain. The return to Yathrib. Back home, the men shared what they had heard. They did not preach loudly. They spoke quietly, in homes, in gatherings, among relatives. But their words found fertile ground. Yathrib was tired of conflict, tired of rivalry, tired of waiting for a leader who could unite them. And the idea of a prophet, a man guided by God, a man known in Mecca for honesty and fairness, felt like a possible answer. Soon, more people from Yathrib became curious. When the next pilgrimage season arrived, a slightly larger group traveled to Mecca, not only for worship, but for another meeting. They found Muhammad again, this time with the quiet eagerness of people seeking real change. His message touched them even more deeply, and one by one, they accepted Islam. Softly, humbly, with hearts hopeful for a new beginning. They made a promise to him that day, a simple pledge of loyalty. To worship God alone, to avoid wrongdoing, and to support what is right. This moment would later be remembered as the first pledge of Aqaba, a quiet step, almost unnoticed by Mecca, but destined to reshape history. A new door opening. When the people of Yathrib returned home, they carried not only belief, but purpose. They shared the teachings of Islam. With friends, with neighbors, with tribes, tired of constant conflict, the message spread quietly, like dawn gradually touching the horizon. And soon, whispers grew into conversations. Conversations grew into hope. Hope grew into expectation. Some began to say, if only the messenger of God could come here. He could unite us. He could guide us. He could end our disputes. As Mecca grew more hostile, Yathrib grew more inviting. A place where hearts were opening, where the soil of faith was rich, where a new future was waiting. Muhammad could not yet see it fully, but the path toward migration was slowly forming. Step by step, meeting by meeting, soul by soul. It would not be long before a group from Yathrib returned, with a pledge far deeper, far more serious, far more transformative. One that would change the direction of the entire Muslim community. A pledge that would eventually lead to a journey under the desert stars, a new home, and the birth of a city called Medina. Part 11. The second pledge, a night of secrets, loyalty, and the first steps toward Hira. The months following the first pledge passed quietly, but not silently. In Yathrib, the message of Islam traveled from one heart to another. Softly, gently, like a breeze weaving through the palm groves. A farmer heard it from his cousin. A merchant heard it from a traveler. A mother heard it from her son. A clan leader heard it from his nephew. No large gatherings, no public sermons, just small, private conversations beneath shaded courtyards, inside cool mud brick homes, beside wells where people came to draw water. Every believer who returned from Mecca carried something precious. A spark of hope, a vision of unity, a promise of peace in a city tired of its own feuds. Slowly, Yathrib began to shift. People spoke less about old rivalries and more about this new faith that called for mercy, justice, and forgiveness. Stories spread about Muhammad's character, his honesty, his patience, his compassion. Even those who did not yet believe acknowledged one thing: such a man could unite us. And for the first time in generations, the dream of a peaceful Yathrib didn't feel impossible. A city preparing without knowing. As the next pilgrimage season drew near, a quiet excitement pulsed beneath the surface of the oasis. Some prepared caravans not only for trade, but for a purpose unspoken. A desire to meet the messenger again. Men whispered in the streets at dusk, "I will go to Mecca this year." Others nodded with knowing eyes. "You will meet him again, won't you?" A soft smile, a simple yes, and nothing more. When departure day came, a group far larger than the year before set out on the long road to Mecca. Their hearts carried expectation, their minds carried questions, and somewhere deep inside, they carried the growing belief that their city might become the Prophet's home. The meeting that changed history. Once in Mecca, the group performed their pilgrimage as usual, but that was not the purpose of their journey. Under the cover of night, when the fires of the camps had dimmed, and the desert grew quiet, the men of Yathrib searched for Muhammad. They found him in a secluded place, near the steep paths of Aqaba, a location hidden by rocks, far from the eyes and ears of Quraysh. Muhammad arrived with a companion or two, moving with quiet steps, aware of the great significance of this moment. The meeting began softly. Whispers carried in the cool night air. Torches were kept low. Voices barely rose above murmurs. The moon watched silently from behind drifting clouds. There were about 73 men and 2 women from Yathrib. A large gathering, almost an entire delegation of hope. They spoke of the conflicts in their city, the longing for unity, the desire for a leader who could guide them. They said to Muhammad, "We believe in you. We believe in your message. Come to our city. We will protect you. We will defend you as we defend our own." For a moment, the night held its breath. This was no small promise. It was a pledge of loyalty, not only to faith, but to sacrifice, struggle, and responsibility. Muhammad listened carefully. He spoke of commitment, of duty, of the challenges ahead. He reminded them that welcoming him meant welcoming danger, that Quraysh would not accept this easily. But the people of Yathrib were firm. Their voices, though quiet, were steady. One of their leaders stood and said, "Stretch out your hand, messenger of God, we will pledge to you." And there, beneath the shadowed cliffs of Aqaba, in the stillness of a sacred night, the pledge was made. Hands touched hands. Hearts touched hearts. Promises were sealed. This became known as the Second Pledge of Aqaba, a turning point, a moment when faith transformed into community, in to nationhood, en to destiny. A new future opens. After the pledge, the men of Yathrib departed quickly, moving through the darkness, avoiding any sound that might alert Quraysh. Their steps were light, but their hearts were full, filled with the knowledge that their city was about to become the center of a new chapter in history. Back in Mecca, the situation shifted almost immediately. Rumors began to circulate. Quraysh sensed something had happened in the night, something important, something dangerous to their control. Whispers spread through the alleys. People from Yathrib met Muhammad. They promised him something. There was a vow in the darkness. Fear mingled with anger. If Muhammad now had an entire city ready to welcome him, Quraysh's power over him and over the future was slipping. They decided to watch him more closely, to monitor the Muslims, to prevent any unexpected movement. But something was already happening, something quiet, something steady, something unstoppable. The migration begins in silence. Muhammad gathered his companions and told them, gently but firmly, "Your place is now in Yathrib. Go, for God has made for you brothers and a home." Families began leaving secretly. Small groups slipped out of Mecca under the moonlight. Some traveled by night, resting in caves by day. Others took unfamiliar paths to avoid detection. Slowly, the homes of Muslims grew empty. A pot left unwashed, a door left half open, a carpet rolled in a corner. Small signs of a quiet exodus. Quraysh felt the shift but could not stop it. The believers were scattering. Toward safety, toward hope, toward a future waiting in Yathrib. And Muhammad remained in Mecca a little longer, not because he was afraid, but because he was waiting for a sign and for the moment appointed to him. Meanwhile, Quraysh began to plot. They knew that if Muhammad escaped to Yathrib, their grip on Arabia would crumble. So behind the walls of their gathering halls, in the flicker of firelight, the leaders of Mecca devised a plan. A plan to stop him. Before the migration could be completed, a plan that would lead to one of the most dramatic nights in all of Islamic history. The night of the plot was approaching, and the path to Hira was about to open fully through danger, through patience, and through divine guidance. PART 12, the night of the plot, shadows, secrets, and the cave of Thawr. The days after the second pledge felt different. Mecca looked unchanged. The same winding streets, the same stone houses beneath the burning sun. Yet there was something new in the air, something uneasy, something unsettled. Quraysh had learned of the pledge, not in detail, but enough. They knew that the people of Yathrib had promised Muhammad protection. They knew this meant he could leave Mecca at any time. They knew that if he reached Yathrib safely, their influence across Arabia might collapse. Fear spread among the leaders, like sparks drifting through dry grass, and fear, when it grows too strong, often turns into something darker. Quraysh's secret gathering. One night, as the city settled into silence, the most powerful chiefs of Mecca gathered in the House of Council, a large shadowed room lit by a single flame. The air was thick. Voices were tense. Plans scattered across the floor like broken pieces. Some said, "Let us imprison him." Others said, "Let us exile him." But each idea faded under scrutiny. If they imprisoned him, his followers might try to free him. If they exiled him, he would gather allies elsewhere. Then Abu Jahl, sharp-minded, ruthless, determined, spoke. Each tribe should send one warrior, then all strike at once. If his blood is shared among all tribes, his family cannot seek revenge. It was a brutal plan, cold and calculated. But the chiefs agreed. The decision was sealed. This night would be remembered as the night Quraysh planned to extinguish the message. By extinguishing the messenger, but unseen by them, another plan, greater, gentler, divine, was already in motion. The warning arrives. As the chiefs plotted, Muhammad remained in his home, calm and composed. Gabriel came to him in the stillness of night with a message. "Do not sleep in your bed tonight. Quraysh has decided to kill you." No panic touched his heart, only quiet certainty. He knew the time had come. The migration, the long-awaited Hira, was about to begin. He called for Ali, the young cousin who had grown up under his care and loved him more deeply than words could express. Ali entered the room quietly, not yet aware of what was happening. Muhammad explained the situation softly, gently, his voice steady. He asked Ali to sleep in his bed that night, to confuse Quraysh and give him time to slip away before they realized he was gone. It was a request filled with danger, but Ali agreed without hesitation. For him, loyalty was not a burden. It was a gift. A calm departure in a dangerous night. Outside, assassins began to gather, one from each clan, their shadows flickering under the moonlight. They waited for the moment. Muhammad would sleep inside the house. Ali wrapped himself in the Prophet's cloak and lay upon the bed, peaceful, unafraid. Muhammad looked at him with affection, a look filled with gratitude and quiet emotion. Then, with gentle steps, he opened the door of his home. The assassins were just outside, close enough to touch, yet they did not see him. He walked past them, calmly, quietly, reciting verses for protection. Verses that became a shield between him and danger. The night embraced him, and he disappeared into its stillness. By the time the assassins rushed into the house, thinking he was asleep, Ali sat up in the bed. Muhammad was already far away. The journey begins. Muhammad went to the home of Abu Bakr, his closest friend, who had been waiting for this moment, with packed supplies and 2 camels prepared for a secret journey when Muhammad arrived. Abu Bakr's face lit with a mixture of relief and emotion. "Have they permitted you to leave?" he asked. "Yes," Muhammad answered softly. "They have planned to kill me." A long silence followed. Not of fear, but of understanding. They would travel together, not north toward Yathrib immediately, but south toward the rugged mountains. To confuse their pursuers, their destination, the cave of Thawr, hidden among steep cliffs and jagged stones. They moved through the night, with quiet footsteps, avoiding paths where anyone might see them. The city behind them slept, aware of nothing. The desert before them stretched like an endless sea. The cave of Thawr. Reaching the mountain was difficult. Steep paths cut their feet, sharp rocks scraped their skin, but they climbed with determination and trust. Finally, they reached the small, narrow entrance of the cave. Inside, the air was cool, the darkness deep, and the silence profound. Abu Bakr entered first, to clear away any danger. Snakes, scorpions, or creatures that might harm the Prophet. He covered holes in the rocks with his own clothing, ensuring the space was safe. And then, at last, Muhammad entered. The journey of Hira had begun, not with a grand procession, but with 2 men sitting quietly in the deep stillness of a cave, beneath the vast star-filled sky. The pursuit. At dawn, Quraysh discovered the truth. Muhammad had escaped. Panic spread through Mecca. The chiefs gathered again, angry and shaken. A bounty was announced. A large reward for anyone who captured him. Search parties scattered across the desert. Tracks were examined. Caravans were questioned. Every path was swept with attention. And soon, the pursuers reached the mountain of Thawr. They climbed its slopes, their voices echoing through the rocks. At one point, they stood so close to the cave that Abu Bakr whispered in fear, "If they look down, they will see us." Muhammad placed a calming hand on his shoulder and said words that would echo for centuries. "Do not fear. Indeed, God is with us." Peace settled over the cave. Like a soft blanket, confidence filled their hearts. The pursuers stood at the very mouth of the cave, and yet they turned away. for they saw signs that deceived them. A spider's web stretched across the entrance, untouched, as if no one had passed inside for years. And two birds rested nearby, their nest undisturbed. To the pursuers, these were proof that no human could be inside. They left, their footsteps fading into the distance. Inside the cave, the two men breathed again. Not with relief, but with gratitude. Their journey was far from over, but the greatest danger had passed. The dawn of a new beginning. They remained in the cave for 3 days. 3 days of stillness, quiet prayers, and whispered plans. Food was brought secretly by Asma, Abu Bakr's daughter, brave and resourceful. News was carried by Abdullah, who mingled with Quraysh by day and climbed the mountain by night to inform them of the situation. When the time was finally right, a trusted guide and 2 strong camels waited at the base of the mountain. The road to Yathrib, long, winding, filled with danger, was ready. The migration, the turning point of Islamic history, was about to enter its next phase. And a new chapter, a new city, and a new world waited beyond the horizon. PART-13, the long road north across sands, stars, and silent horizons. The cave was quiet. When the time finally came to leave, 3 days had passed. Since the night of the plot, 3 days of whispers, of waiting, of trusting that danger would soften into distance now as the first color of dawn touched the horizon. Muhammad and Abu Bakr stepped out of the cave of Thawr and looked toward the vast desert stretching north. The air felt different, lighter, freer, as if the very wind knew that history had begun to shift. Their guide, Abdullah ibn Urayqit, a skilled navigator known for his honesty, waited with 2 camels prepared for the journey. Near them stood Asma, Abu Bakr's daughter, who had secretly carried food up the mountain. Every night, her courage lingered in the cool morning air. Like a quiet blessing, supplies were tied, water skins adjusted, saddles secured. And when the sun finally rose, a soft gold brushing over the mountain stones, the small group began to move, slowly, steadily, northward, toward Yathrib, toward a new world. The desert opens like an endless book. The first hours of travel were wrapped in silence, not out of fear, but out of awe. The desert in early morning is a gentle place. Shadows long, air cool, sand firm beneath the feet. Muhammad rode with calm posture, his gaze steady on the horizon. Abu Bakr kept looking around anxiously, worried pursuers might appear from behind any hill. But the Prophet's voice, soft and steady, would reassure him again and again. God is with us. As the sun climbed higher, the heat thickened, the air shimmered, and the world around them turned into a quiet sea of gold. Their guide led them through paths unknown to most travelers, winding trails, hidden valleys, and narrow passes where no one would expect them to go. These detours slowed their pace, but they kept the group safe. Every step was a step away from danger and a step toward destiny. Footprints and echoes. Not far behind, search parties from Quraysh scoured the land. Hooves thundered across the plains, voices shouted on distant hills, and hunters looked for any sign that could lead them to the fugitives. Sometimes the wind carried faint echoes of those distant pursuits. And Abu Bakr's heart tightened with worry. What if they catch us? He would whisper, and each time, Muhammad would turn to him with serene calm. Do not grieve. Indeed, God is with us. These words settled the tension. Like cool water poured over heated stone, slowly, Abu Bakr's breathing became steady. His fear softened. And trust carried him forward. Moments of stillness on the journey. Traveling through the desert is not a constant struggle. It is a rhythm, a slow, steady dance. Between the heat of day and the calm of night, there were moments when the group stopped beneath small patches of shade created by clusters of rocks. They would drink cool sips of water. Soften dry dates with their breath. And rest their legs. From the endless motion of the camels, sometimes Muhammad would speak quietly. Words of reflection. Words of hope. Words reminding them that hardship is always followed by ease. Other times. The silence would take over. A comforting silence. Filled with the soft rustle of desert wind. Even the camels seemed to sense the sacredness of the moment. Moving with calm steps, as if they too understood the destiny unfolding. A near encounter. One afternoon. As the sun dropped low and the desert cooled. The group noticed distant riders moving across a ridge. Their silhouettes were sharp against the orange sky. Abu Bakr's breath caught. His hand tightened on the reins. But their guide observed the riders carefully and whispered, "They are too far away and moving in the wrong direction. They will not see us." Still, they paused until the riders vanished beyond a curve of land. Moments like these reminded them how narrow the path of escape could truly be. But each time danger approached. It drifted away again, like a cloud passing without releasing rain. The desert by night, traveling at night, was a different experience entirely. The desert transformed into a cool, silent world where stars stretched from one horizon to the other, so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Their guide navigated by those stars. Reading their positions with practiced ease. The camels walked quietly. Their footsteps soft on the sand. Their shadows long under the moonlight. Sometimes they would stop to rest under the open sky, and in those moments, Muhammad would sit, gazing upward. Reflecting on creation, on the vastness above, and the miracles within. Abu Bakr would watch him with quiet admiration. Realizing more deeply with every passing hour why he had chosen to walk this path. Hospitality in the wilderness. There were rare occasions when the travelers encountered small desert dwellings, humble tents. Lonely shepherds. Families living far from the cities. One such encounter was with a woman named Mabad, known for her generosity toward travelers. Though her tent held little food. She welcomed them with kindness, and a small, thin goat, weak and unfed, was milked after Muhammad placed his hand upon it. Offering fresh milk to the weary companions. Bad watched the scene and wondered. Scribing the Prophet in words that later became famous. Words filled with admiration, respect, and a sense of witnessing something extraordinary. They left her tent with full hearts, and her blessing followed them. Like a gentle breeze. The sand, the stars, and the unseen protection. Day after day, night after night, they pushed onward across dunes that rose. Like silent mountains, across plains that reached the horizon. Without a single tree, across landscapes so vast that even the sky seemed larger there, and through all of it, danger continued to chase them. From far behind, but it never caught up. Every step felt guided, every moment of fear was met with reassurance. Every shadow of threat faded before it reached them, as if a gentle, unseen hand was clearing the path just enough for them to pass safely. The first signs of Yathrib. After many days of travel, the landscape began to change. Green patches appeared. First small, then larger. Palm groves dotted the horizon. The air softened, the scent of plants mingled with the desert wind. This was not yet Yathrib, but it was its outskirts, the beginning of the land that would become their new home. Abu Bakr's heart lifted as he saw the first hints of life. Muhammad smiled gently, not out of relief, but out of quiet recognition. The promise was nearing fulfillment. The journey was not over yet, but the destination was beginning to breathe. Just beyond the horizon, PART 14, Quba, the first dawn of a new life. The journey had been long, longer than anyone who had never crossed a desert could imagine. Days of burning heat, nights of soft cold, endless horizons, endless patience. But now, after miles and miles of golden plains and starlit silence, the world around them began to change. Palm trees, real palm trees, tall, green, swaying gently in a breeze that felt kinder than anything they had felt in weeks. The air smelled different, fresh, moist, alive, like a breath after a long moment underwater. This was not yet Yathrib, but it was its threshold, its welcome mat, its promise. And just ahead, nestled in a quiet hollow between groves of date palms, stood a small village. Quba, the first destination, the first safe place, the first step into a new world. A village awakened by hope. The people of Quba had been waiting. News had reached them that Muhammad was on his way. Whispers carried by travelers, rumors spreading between oases, stories told by those who had journeyed south to find him. Every morning, they would walk out to the open roads, shading their eyes from the sun, hoping they might see travelers in the distance. And every evening, they returned home with gentle disappointment. But not today. On this day, a man climbed a palm tree to gather dates. He looked across the desert and froze. 3 travelers approached, dust on their clothes, calm in their posture, light in their steps. The man squinted, heart pounding. Then he climbed down, as fast as his hands and feet would allow. They have arrived. They are here. His voice echoed through the village, like a call to prayer. People rushed outside, faces filled with anticipation, hearts trembling between joy and disbelief. And as Muhammad and Abu Bakr drew nearer, the villagers recognized him. Not just from descriptions, but from something deeper. A peace in his presence, a calm that radiated outward, a quiet certainty that settled the hearts of all who looked at him. Quba welcomed him, not as a visitor, but as someone long awaited. Rest after hardship. For the first time in days, Muhammad and Abu Bakr found a place where fear did not follow them. People brought water, dates, shade, smiles. Children watched shyly. From behind their mother's garments, elders approached with trembling hands, filled with respect they had never before shown. To a man they had never met, Muhammad stayed in Quba as a guest, in the home of the clan of Amr ibn Oef. A simple home, cool and welcoming, surrounded by palm trees. The days that followed felt lighter, as if the desert had finally loosened its grip on them. They prayed together, they rested, they reflected. There was no rush now, no need to hide, no footsteps to listen for, only peace. The first mosque. During his stay in Quba, Muhammad began something that would echo through centuries. He helped the people build a place of prayer. A simple structure, walls of clay, roof of palm trunks. Not grand, not elaborate, but sincere. This would become the first mosque in Islam, a symbol of community, a beacon of unity. Men carried stones with their hands. Women brought water and clay. Children watched with shining eyes. And Muhammad himself joined in the work, lifting stones, placing them gently, his movements careful, patient, as if aware that these humble walls were the foundation of something far greater. Whenever a stone was lifted crookedly, he would straighten it, not with criticism, but with a soft smile. In the quiet rhythm of building, the people of Quba felt a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of something sacred. Days filled with calm, Muhammad remained in Quba for several days. Some say 14, others say less. But each day was marked by serenity. Visitors came from nearby areas, wanting to meet him. They found a man whose presence brought ease, whose voice softened their worries, whose words felt like cool shade beneath the midday sun. Abu Bakr, recovering from exhaustion, would sit beside him, sometimes smiling, sometimes wiping quiet tears of gratitude. When no one noticed, their guide, who had brought them safely across the desert, returned home. His task completed, his name forever preserved. People continued to whisper, "He has arrived. He is safe. He is among us." And each whisper spread further, carrying hope to every corner of Yathrib. A city prepares to welcome a messenger. Not far away, in Yathrib, the news reached the Ansar, the helpers who had pledged loyalty. At Aqaba, when they heard that Muhammad had reached Quba, their hearts lifted as if a heavy weight had slipped away. Excitement filled the streets. Children ran through the alleys. Women prepared food. Men gathered in groups, discussing what this meant for their city, for their future, for their lives. Some asked, "When will he enter Yathrib?" Others answered, "Soon, very soon." It was a city preparing, not just to welcome a traveler, but to welcome a leader, a guide, a man who would turn their divided town into a united beacon of faith. A moment of revelation. On a calm morning in Koba Dot, while the sun rose gently and the air still felt cool, a revelation came. Gabriel descended with a message. It was time. Time to enter Yathrib. Time to begin the next chapter. Time to transform the oasis into the heart of a new civilization. Muhammad stood calm and ready. His face lit by the soft glow of dawn. He gathered his companions. He thanked the people of Quba. He embraced the village with words of gratitude, and then with steady steps and a quiet heart, he prepared to resume the journey. Not as a fugitive, not as a traveler, but as a leader returning to a city waiting with open arms. Toward Yathrib, toward Medina, the path from Quba to Yathrib was not long, but the meaning of this short journey was profound. The world felt different now. No longer filled with pursuit, or danger, or fear. Instead, there was anticipation, joy, a sense of beginning. As they walked, the people of Quba accompanied them. Men, women, children. Their steps filled with excitement, their voices soft with reverence. Ahead lay Yathrib, still unaware of the exact moment. Their new guest would arrive, but ready, more ready than any city had ever been. And with each step, the desert behind them faded, and the promise before them grew brighter. A new home, a new chapter, a new society built on faith, unity, and hope. The messenger of God was about to enter Yathrib, and Yathrib was about to become Medina. PART 15. The arrival in Yathrib, the city becomes Medina. The path from Quba to Yathrib was only a short distance. A gentle road, lined with palm groves, soft earth, and the quiet sound of wind moving through leaves. But for Muhammad, for Abu Bakr, and for the people waiting ahead, this short path was the bridge between two worlds. Behind them lay Mecca, a city of memories, of revelation, of love and loss, of struggle and nighttime escapes. Ahead of them lay Yathrib, a city ready to transform, a place where hope had been waiting with open hands. As they walked, the sunlight warmed the morning air, and the villagers of Quba walked beside them for a time, reluctant to say goodbye, grateful to have been the first to welcome the messenger. But as the city grew nearer, the people of Quba slowed their steps, letting the travelers move ahead, toward a future written long before any of them had been born. A city waiting with beating hearts. For days, the people of Yathrib had been gathering outside their homes, scanning the road, listening for news. Every morning, they would climb to rooftops, walk to the outskirts, or wait under the shade of palm trees, hoping this would be the day. They knew Muhammad had left Mecca. They knew he had reached Quba. And now, whispers spread quickly. He is coming. Today, he is coming. Men stopped their work. Women hurried to prepare food. Children gathered in clusters, eyes bright with anticipation. The entire city, rich and poor, young and old, men, women, and children, seemed to breathe in unison. And then, under the brightness of midday, a cry rose from the outskirts. They are here. They are approaching. The sound spread like a wave. Through the streets of Yathrib, people rushed forward, some running, others walking quickly, all with hearts pounding, as if awakening from a long, hopeful dream. The welcome of a lifetime, when Muhammad and Abu Bakr finally appeared on the road, the city erupted in joy. Voices cheered, hands waved, faces glowed with excitement. Women and children began to sing, Tala al-Badr alayna, min thaniyati al-wada. The full moon has risen over us. From the valley of Wada, the song rose through the air, like a soft, joyful wind, carrying gratitude, carrying honor, carrying love. Children ran ahead of the procession, pointing and laughing. Young men shouted words of welcome. Women stepped into doorways with smiles that reached their eyes. It was not a welcome for a ruler, nor for a warrior, nor for a king, but for a guide, a teacher, a man whose presence brought light into every corner of their hearts. Families compete to host him. As Muhammad entered the city, a beautiful and gentle rivalry unfolded around him. Each family wanted the honor of hosting him. Men would approach quietly, but insistently, "Stay with us." "No, stay in our home. We are ready for you. We have space. We would be honored." Their voices were soft, respectful, but filled with energy. This was not competition, it was love. Pure and sincere, but Muhammad smiled and gave them all the same answer. "Leave the camel," she is commanded. For his she-camel, Al-Qaswa, had been walking with calm purpose, never speeding, never hesitating, as if guided by something unseen. So the people stepped back and watched her walk through narrow streets, past gardens, past humble homes. Step after step, she carried destiny on her back. The camel's choice. The she-camel finally reached an open space, a simple plot of land, used to dry dates. Nothing special, nothing grand, just open earth, belonging to two orphan boys of the Banu Najjar. There, I and the stillness of midday, the camel stopped. She lowered her neck, folded her legs, and knelt. The crowd fell completely silent. Then Muhammad said gently, "This is the place where he would stay, the place where the heart of the new community would begin to beat, the place that would become the site of the Prophet's mosque." People stood in awe, trying to memorize the moment, as if storing a treasure inside their hearts. A home found, a city transformed. The Prophet chose to stay temporarily in the home of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, a humble, kind man, overwhelmed with honor. His house was simple, 2 small floors, nothing extravagant. But its warmth and sincerity were priceless. Abu Ayyub rushed to prepare meals, often giving the best portions to his honored guest, and keeping little for himself. He and his wife whispered prayers of gratitude late into the night, unable to believe that the messenger of God was resting beneath their roof. Muhammad stayed with them until the mosque and his own living quarters were completed. The first stones of Medina, the plot of land where the camel had knelt, was purchased from the orphans. With fairness and kindness, then the work began, men from the Ansar. And the Muhajirin brought stones, carried timber, mixed mud. Muhammad himself lifted stones with them. Sweat on his forehead, dust on his clothes, showing that leadership was not about status, but service. And slowly, stone by stone, the first mosque in Medina rose from the earth, not tall, not ornate, not majestic, but full of meaning, full of unity, full of peace. It was more than a building. It was the heart of a new community. Yathrib becomes Medina as the mosque took shape and the community found its rhythm. The city itself seemed to change. Old tensions between tribes softened. Stories of past conflicts lost their sharpness. People who had once been rivals worked side by side, lifting stones, sharing meals, making plans. The immigrants from Mecca, the Muhajirun, were welcomed generously by the people of Yathrib. The Ansar, they shared homes, shared food, shared hearts, the city once known. As Yathrib, took on a new name, Madinat an-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, or simply Medina, a city of light, a city of unity, a city of hope. Here, for the first time, Islam would flourish openly. Here, a new society would rise. Here, the seeds of mercy and justice would take root. The Hijra was complete. A new chapter had begun. End of the first period. With the arrival in Medina, the first era of the story closes. The era of revelation, patience, trial, migration, and new beginnings. Ahead lie new stories. Bonds of brotherhood, the constitution of Medina, the trials of the early battles, and the growth of a community that would change history forever. Thank you for watching this episode. We've reached the end of this chapter, but the story is far from over. In the next video, we'll continue exploring the early days in Medina and the incredible transformations that shaped the first Muslim community. If you enjoyed this episode and want to follow the rest of the journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. See you very soon for the continuation of the story.